Christian here from McDonald Educational Technologies, and in this video I'm going to walk you through the process step by step on how to set up the Koha open source integrated library system on top of Debian 10. Now, like a lot of open source projects out there that are really good, one of the things that I've always found that's lacking in many open source projects that I use is adequate documentation. So this video hopefully will serve as a launching platform for you to get Koha running in your environment so you can begin to play with it. I'm not going to go into using Koha from the perspective of a school and a library in this video, but I am going to show you how to actually get it configured. This video will likely be the first of several videos that I make around the Koha system. And if you're excited for those, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss those. I plan on talking about taking a standalone Koha installation and deploying it in a highly available scenario where we actually clusterize all the components of the stack, including Apache, ElasticSearch, Memcached, and Maria using Galera. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and start off with just getting Koha installed on a standalone server and as our first step. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into a VM that is I've already pre-made for this demo. This VM is nothing more than just a plain installation of Debian 10 Buster. I believe it has been updated. Let me just make sure that all the packages, all the packages are up to date. So the only thing that I've done so far with this installation is that I've installed Debian with the basic system utilities and also SSH. So SSH is installed. I'm logged in as root currently, and other than that, it is a very vanilla installation. So Koha has several prereqs that we need to take care of, and some of these prereqs are not required when you actually do attempt to follow the documentation. By default, Koha uses the Zebra indexer. For reasons that I'm not going to go into right now, you really, if you're deploying Koha in 2020, the focus forward with the Koha community is to use ElasticSearch as the backend indexing platform. So what we're going to do in this video is we're not even going to bother with Zebra. We're going to install this with ElasticSearch. And we're also going to install with MariaDB as a first step into the future videos where we take the SQL data store and we actually clusterize that using Galera. But again, we're not going to go into clustering at this point. So we're going to go ahead and jump into some of the prereqs for installing Koha on this standalone Debian VM. And besides the installation, it has a static IP, and I've created a DNS entry on my local DNS server just so I can hit it with a domain or host name in a web browser. And I'll talk about why that's important later. Koha has multi-tenancy, so you can actually serve multiple libraries from one installation, and it uses Apache rules on the back end to direct host names to specific instances of Koha running. So we need to make sure that we have a static IP and also a domain, a DNS configured with a host name. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into installing some prereqs before we actually install Koha. The first thing that we're going to do is run a command here that's just going to install a few things because this is a Debian install and I'm logged in as root. I don't have access to sudo, which is not really necessary, but all the commands are prefixed with sudo, so I'm not going to go ahead and bother rewriting those. So I'm going to go ahead and install sudo. I'm also going to install the GNU PG, GPG tools for validating the GPG keys of the repositories. And I'm also going to install software properties common, which has the apt-add repository command, which just makes adding repositories a little easier. So I'm going to go ahead and add these and install them. Again, I'll post all these commands on Pastebin. And once those packages are installed, we'll go ahead and clear the console and proceed with installing adopt OpenJDK. So we're going to go ahead first. We're going to add the OpenJDK GPG public key to this box. Oops, didn't want to type that twice. And we see OK, so that key was successfully imported. Next, we're going to add the repository for adopt OpenJDK. So go ahead and add that. Again, if you get an error with this command that the add apt repository command is not found, you need to add that software properties common package. That's where that command is found. Okay, once we add the repository, we're going to update. So just do a sudo apt update. So sudo apt-get update. This is going to update those packages. And then we need to actually install the adopt OpenJDK. Now we're going to install adopt OpenJDK 11, and we're going to install the OpenJ9 JVM. So we're going to say sudo apt-get install, and then adopt OpenJDK 11 and OpenJ9. This is going to install the OpenJ9 JVM, which is a little lighter in my experience in memory, even though it might cost a little more in CPU. So it's a trade-off. You could use hotspot if you want. Both will work. So we're just going to let this download here. All right, once the Java is installed, we can go ahead and check to make sure that it installed by running Java and then with the version switch. And you can see here that we've got OpenJDK runtime. It's OpenJ9 based on JDK 11. So that's important because ElasticSearch actually is a Java application. All right, so next, let's work on ElasticSearch. We're going to go ahead and do pretty much the same thing, but for ElasticSearch. So we're going to start with the ElasticSearch GPG keys, and we get OK as the result for that. You might need to install the apt HTTP transport. I don't recall if that's installed by default, but we'll go ahead and run that, and it was not. So in order to touch repositories that are protected with TLS, HTTPS, you're going to need to install the apt transport HTTPS package. From there, we're going to run this command to just write out the repository to your apt sources list D folder for ElasticSearch. So we'll run that. Then we're going to do an apt-get update again to pull in those packages, and then we're going to say apt-get install ElasticSearch. And this should install ElasticSearch against the repository that we just added. Now, again, you need to make sure that you are installing ElasticSearch version 6.8. ElasticSearch 7 is not supported by Koha as of October 28th. So you'll need to install the 6.8 branch for the latest version that's supported by Koha. Okay, once ElasticSearch is installed, we're going to reload the system control, and then we're going to enable ElasticSearch service so that it automatically launches upon system startup. And then we're going to start the service so that it's ready to go when we actually install Koha. Now, there are two ways to check if ElasticSearch is running. The first is systemctl status Elasticsearch, and you can see that it is running. And then the second way that we can check that it's running is to actually hit it with curl. So Elasticsearch is just a little web server, and by default it's served over port 9200. So we can just say curl localhost 9200. Oh, we don't have curl, so let's install curl. We'll say apt install curl. We'll install curl here, and we'll try that again. So curl localhost 9200, and you can see we do get a response back. We get the version, we get the cluster name, we get the name of this node on this cluster. This cluster only has one node at the moment. We're not going to talk about clustering Elasticsearch in this video. And then the tagline, you know, for search. So ElasticSearch is working, and by default, it's only going to be listening on localhost. which is fine for this. We don't need Elasticsearch to be listening on any other IPs besides localhost. Okay, so once we have Elasticsearch installed, we're going to go ahead and get Maria installed. Now, the default version of Maria that is in the Debian 10 repository is Maria 10.3. We're going to skip Maria 10.3. Now, if you do read the Koha documentation, they recommend 10.3. I have been using 10.5 in production for a while, and I have not found any problems at all. I think it works really well. And there are some ancillary benefits to using 10.5 over 10.3 that we might address in a future video. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and proceed with installing Maria 10.5. So the first thing we need to do is grab the Maria repo setup script. Maria provides, the Maria community, they provide a script for actually configuring repos on machines, and it's just the MariaDB _repo _setup. By default, obviously, this is not going to be executable, so we're going to run chmod +x to make that executable. And then once we do that, we need to run it with the server version MariaDB-10.5. And this will do all of the necessary changes to automatically add the package signing keys, run apt-get update, and all that stuff. So it basically is a little script that does everything that we did for Java and Elasticsearch for us, so it's kind of nice. Then we're going to run apt-update, and then apt install MariaDB server, and we're going to go ahead and install MariaDB backup. Now, we're not going to use MariaDB backup in this video. MariaDB backup is Maria's preferred backup system. If you've ever done Maria clustering, you might be familiar with Percona Extra Backup. This is a lock-free backup solution. MariaDB backup is now the preferred backup provider when doing Galera clustering. So we're just going to go ahead and install that. It's not required. It's not required with a standalone server, but we're going to go ahead and install it. It's not going to hurt anything. So we're going to go ahead and install MariaDB, and this should go pretty quick. Okay. All right. So at this point, we should have the JRE, the Java runtime installed. We should have Elasticsearch installed and running, and we also should now have MariaDB installed 10.5. So the next thing we're going to do is actually get Koha installed. So we're going to go through pretty much the same process. We're going to add the Koha GPG keys first, and we get the familiar OK. Let me go ahead and clear the console to bring everything to the top. Next, we're going to go ahead and echo out the 10.5 repo into our app sources list.d folder. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Then we're going to run apt-update to update the repos, and then we're going to say apt install Koha common and run this. This is going to this is the command that's going to install everything that we need for Koha, including Apache, all the Apache modules, Perl, all the Perl modules, and do everything that we need for Koha. So we're going to go ahead and say yes and run this. This will take a few minutes, so I'm going to speed through the video here. So now we're actually ready to create our Koha instance for our demo library. So before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about how Koha handles multi-tenancy. The way that this works is when you create a library, Koha creates all the Apache rules necessary to do the matching with the host names. And there's really two different websites that are served by Apache when running Koha. There is the front end that patrons of your library will interact with. This is called the OPAC or the OPAC. And then there's the back-end staff client. And by default, you can check what those host names are going to look like by going into the etc Koha, and then kohasites.conf file. And here you can see that there are a few different parameters. There's domain, there's the intra port, the intra prefix, the intra suffix, the opac port, the opac prefix, and the opac suffix. So this is where you can customize how your domain names are created when you actually run the command to create a library tenant. So obviously the domain name, we're going to change this. I'm going to change this to my local AD domain. So this is, again, this is the fully qualified domain of my inside network here, my Active Directory. And then the intra port, we can go ahead and leave at 80. And the intra prefix, we're going to leave that blank. And the intra suffix, we're going to replace the dash intra with dash staff. Now you can, again, customize this however you like, but the way that I do this is whatever the name of my library instance is, the opac domain is just that dot and then the domain, the FQDN. And then the staff client, or the intra, as it's referred to here in this configuration file, I just take that same name and with the suffix dash staff. So that's what you'll direct your opac users to. If you have a kiosk in your library and you're automatically opening up a website, you'll want to direct that kiosk to the opac, and then your staff will use the staff portal. Okay? So this is what that looks like. Now, there's really not any reason to host these on different ports unless you have a good reason. If you are accessing this via IP addresses, obviously changing the ports is going to be a requirement for that. But because we're just going to go ahead and set up the DNS side, we can just do that, and they can both be served on port 80. So we're going to go ahead and make those changes, and we're going to save this configuration file out. All right, once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and set up some Apache modules that need to be enabled. The first is the rewrite module. So we're just going to say sudo at-inmod and rewrite. Okay. Oops. Sudo at-inmod CGI. That's required for actually interfacing with all the Perl backend stuff. And then we're going to go ahead and reboot, restart Apache using systemctl restart Apache 2. Oops, Apache 2. All right, we can go ahead and check to make sure that Apache is still running by running systemctl status Apache 2. And we can see that it is running, and it should be listening on port 80. Next, we're going to go ahead and create our Koha instance. Now, when you install Koha using the Debian package, whether on Debian or Ubuntu, it comes with a nice little suite of commands that make some basic administration and configuration of your Koha server a lot easier. If you're installing from source or you're downloading the latest dev snapshots, you're not going to get these commands. But if you install from the package, from the repo, you're going to get these Debian commands, and they're really, really nice. So the first one we're going to run is sudo koha create. This command is what's used for actually creating a new instance. And then all we have to do is say create db switch. This is going to tell it to create a new database on Maria. And then we're going to give it a name. In this case, we're going to say lib demo. And we're going to hit enter. All right, so Koha should now be running. So let's go ahead and go to a web browser. And let's go ahead and go to the libdemo, the fully qualified domain of the opac. And you can see here that the server is saying system maintenance, the Koha online catalog is offline. All right, well, let's try to hit the staff library, the staff portal, or the intra portal. And I remember this is going to be the same domain as the opac, with the exception of the dash staff suffix in the host name portion. And we'll go to the libdemo staff. And you can see that we now are welcomed to the Koha 20.05 web installer. Now, we need to actually get the first username and password, admin username and password from the Koha conf XML file. And there's a few ways that we can do that, but we're going to do it manually just by poking into the Koha configuration for this tenant, for this library instance that we created. We're going to do it manually instead of using the commands that exist to actually just show us on screen what they are immediately, because we're going to need to get familiar with the Koha configuration, both at the server level, which is where you configure the domain prefix and suffix information, and then also at the site level. So we're going to go into a site level configuration. This is located under etc Koha sites, so we're just going to do a cd to etc Koha sites. And then in this folder, you're going to see subfolders for every single library tenant. Notice there's only one here for libdemo. So we're just going to go and cd into libdemo. And then we're going to nano koha conf.xml. All right, so you're going to scroll down to the config section. And under the config section, you're going to see user and pass. This is going to be the default initial staff user, so user 0 in the database. Koha, in this case, it's prefixed with Koha underscore, then the tenant library name, and then there's a randomly generated password there. So we're just going to copy that password, and we're not going to save that, and we're going to come back to the installer, and the username is Koha underscore, and then the name of this library instance, so libdemo, and then that password. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Okay, we're going to keep English as the setup language, or as the system language. And it says that all the required Perl modules appear to be installed and all of the dependencies are installed. So we'll go ahead and continue to the next step. Here is where it is creating the database and the user. Again, the database and the user are named according to the application. In this case, it's Koha underscore and then the name of that library tenant. So go ahead and go to the next step. And it says that the database was created and the user that was created is granted all privileges on the database. So we'll go ahead and click next. Okay, so now we're ready to create the database tables. So now it's going to create the tables, build a schema in the database, and seed it with some initial data. Database tables were created. We'll continue on to the next step. Now it's asking for some basic configuration questions. So we'll click next. Now it's asking whether or not you would like to use Unimark or Mark 21. If you are unsure, you probably want to go with Mark 21. I am not a library scientist, so I am not the person to ask concerning really the differences between Mark 21 and Unimark, but this is how libraries globally around the world store information so that libraries can easily communicate with each other. So this is the bibliographic record information, and there's two different flavors of Mark. Unimark, which is primarily used in European countries, in a few European countries, and Mark 21, which is the one that's preferred globally. So we're going to go ahead and keep that as Mark 21, which is the default. And from here, we're going to just keep the defaults. You might want to consult with your librarian or your library staff on some of these options, but we're just going to go ahead and keep them as default. All right. We're going to click on Set up Koha's Basic Requirements, and now it's going to redirect us to the onboarding process. All right, so here's now where we are going to set up the administrator identity. So we're just going to go ahead and type in my name, and I'm just going to create my card number as 0. If you seeded your installation with libraries, you're going to see a list of libraries that are here. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose Centerville. And my patron category will be staff. And this is going to create my user with the super librarian account permissions. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a username and a password. And we're going to go ahead and say submit. Okay. This is asking for some item types here. We're going to create one item type. We're just going to call it book, B-O-O-K. Again, this is more of questions for your library, your librarian. These are more library science questions, but we're just going to create an item type code of book, and we're just going to say books for the description. Click submit. We can add more in the future pretty easily. New circulation rules. We're just going to leave the defaults here because we want to just get to the actual Koha staff interface. All right, it says congratulations, you finished and are ready to use Koha. We're going to say start using Koha. And now we're presented to the login screen. So we're going to go ahead and type in the username and the password that we defined, and we can log into the staff portal. It's running, it's ready to go. If we go to the OPAC, we can see that the OPAC is running as well. So we'll just go to the non-staff domain. Oops, I think I typed that in wrong. libdemo, and then the FQDN of my internal domain. And you can see that the OPAC is running as well. There's obviously not going to be much here. So now let's do some optimizations. So we have, by default, Koha is using the Zebra indexer. We're going to change that to use the ElasticSearch indexer. And we're also going to enable Plack, which is an Apache module for optimizing the Perl execution. And yeah, so that should be it for the optimizations. By default, you do not get those, but we should enable those. So we're going to go back to PuTTY, back to the SSH instance here, and we're going to go ahead and enable another module. So we're going to do at-nmod. And we're going to enable the headers module and the proxy _ HTTP module. So it enabled both of those. We're going to go ahead and restart Apache again. So systemctl restart Apache 2. And then we're going to enable Plack. So there is a built-in Koha command with the package installation for enabling and disabling Plack. And it is just Koha-Plack, and we're going to say Koha-Plack with the enable switch and then the instance of our library, which is libdemo. Okay. It says Plack enabled for libdemo OPAC and the intranet, which is the staff portal. Sorry, I forgot to actually start Plack. So after sudo Koha-Plack enable libdemo, we're going to say sudo Koha-Plack start libdemo. At this point, we're going to go ahead and restart Apache. So systemctl restart Apache 2. And then if we go back to the Koha staff portal and click on About Koha, we're going to see a new line for PSGI. And you can see that it says Plack, and it's in the deployment mode. So Plack is now enabled. So this is a really useful optimization. It makes things a little more snappy. Memcached by out of the box already comes configured, and the namespace for Memcached by default is again Koha _ and then the name of this tenant, which is libdemo. All right, so the last step here is we need to enable Elasticsearch. So again, by default, Koha is using the Zebra indexer. The Zebra indexer doesn't do too well with clustering. Elasticsearch out of the box includes clustering capability, and moving forward, Elasticsearch is the future for Koha. So we're going to go ahead and configure the standalone instance, to use Elasticsearch. So we're going to go back to PuTTY. Once we have Elasticsearch installed, which we already do, we need to add the the analysis ICU Elastic plugin, and we can do that by first CDing over to the user, share, ElasticSearch, bin, and bin folder. And then inside of this folder, there is a command called ElasticSearch plugin. And this is a command that is used for installing plugins. So we'll just say ElasticSearch plugin and install, and then the analysis ICU plugin. Oops, I typed that in wrong. Of course I did. Analysis ICU plugin. Okay. Once we've installed that, we need to actually restart ElasticSearch to so that it's actually using that plugin. So we'll just say systemctl restart ElasticSearch. Oops, systemctl. I cannot type today. Systemctl restart ElasticSearch. And let's go ahead and just do a sanity check here and make sure that ElasticSearch is running. It is running. We can go ahead and curl localhost 9200 to make sure that it is actually running here. And it is. So it is running, and it is responding to GET requests there. And now we're going to go ahead and enable ElasticSearch and get that running. So before we do that, we want to go back to the Koha staff website, the staff portal, and we want to go to Koha administration, and then we want to type in under the global system preferences, we want to type in search engine. And this is going to find a key where it's asking what our search engine is. We're going to say ElasticSearch. We're going to change that from Zebra to ElasticSearch. We're going to click on Save, and then we're going to go back to Koha, and we're going to actually enable ElasticSearch. So we're going to use the Koha-ElasticSearch command. We're going to say rebuild, and then we're going to say D, and then the name of the library, which is libdemo. Now this command, what it's going to do is it's going to take the current index from Zebra, and it's going to take that and build the initial index in ElasticSearch. Now if you're installing ElasticSearch on a Koha instance that already has tons of bib records, this is going to take some time because it's having to touch every single record and every single value in the MARC records and indexing them accordingly. Because this is a new library, when I run this is going to actually not take very long at all. But you're going to see a lot of cryptic stuff going across the screen. But once we do that, we're going to go ahead and go back to Koha. And we're going to click on About Koha. And you can see under the server information that now we have another line for ElasticSearch and the current node, which again, we're only running ElasticSearch here on the local machine. This is a standalone installation. But if we had other Elasticsearch nodes configured, you would see a list of nodes. It's running, and then you can see the indices for the biblios and the authorities, which both are empty at the moment. Because there are no bib records and no authority records in this instance yet. So at this point, ElasticSearch, the index will automatically update as your librarians add records to Koha, and it will be using ElasticSearch instead of Zebra. And I found that ElasticSearch is a little more performant than Zebra, and more importantly, ElasticSearch does really well with clustering when we actually take this server and we build two new servers just like it and create a cluster of Koha servers. ElasticSearch was built with clustering in mind. So at this point, you should have Koha successfully running on Debian 10 with ElasticSearch 6.8.13, Memcached, Maria 10.5, and Plack enabled. If you have any other comments or you have questions about Koha or anything that you saw in this video, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and post your comments down below. I look forward to reading your comments. If I did something wrong or you have a suggestion for how to improve, I'm always looking for feedback, and I look forward to reading your comments below. Thanks.